Okay, so this is our next video in our continuation of our AWS series. And in this video, we will look at the next service, which is ElastiCache. So before looking into the ElastiCache, let's look out what is in-memory databases. Because if we know about the in-memory database, then it is very easy to know about like what is ElastiCache and what is its use cases and why we like actually need this service. Right. So like generally in day-to-day day-to-day life, like we work with like a SQL kind of database, whether it's MySQL, Oracle, PostgreSQL. Like, so when you use those databases, so where the actual data going to be stored? So the actual data is going to be stored in your hard disk, right? So the data, because if it is going to be stored in your computer, let's suppose you install the database, that is the server only that is going to store the data, but actual data, where the data is going to store? The data is going to store into your hard disk. Similarly, even if you use the cloud database, so where the actual data is going to be stored? That is going to be stored into the hard disk. So those are the like a RDS type of database, but there are in-memory database. In-memory database. So if you read the just keyword in memory means like just in a memory, like in a RAM. That is our read only like random access memory. Right. So in-memory database means these are those databases where the data will be stored in a RAM instead of a disk. So what is the advantage? Like why we are storing in a RAM? Because the RAM, like because generally what we like know about the computer is if we store anything in the RAM and our computer will get shut down, everything will be in the RAM like just wipe out, or even in the server is going to crash. Everything will be going to wipe out in the RAM. So why we are going to store into the RAM instead of a disk? So this is the in-memory database. So in-memory database are those databases where the data is going to be stored. It's a normal database, same as the hard disk kind of thing. Just consider it normal databases, but the only difference is the they are going to store the data in a form of in a RAM only, not in a form of a disk. Right. So what is the like because we know if we have to access the data from the RAM instead of a disk. So if I took 1 minute to access the data from a RAM, maybe I took 5 minutes from the to access the data from a disk. So in memory database is generally like faster. So whenever you are building some applications, so where you want some faster access, like so at that time you can consider about the in-memory databases, so which make it faster to access because the RAM is faster than the disk, which we know. So what are the pros and the cons? So pros is which is fast, which we already know. But what are the disadvantages? Disadvantages because we know even if you go to the market and try to purchase the RAM and the hard disk, so RAM is more costly than the hard disk. Right, the same amount. Let's suppose you are purchasing a 1 TB of RAM and 1 TB of hard disk. So 1 TB of hard disk is cheaper instead of the 1 TB of RAM. So if you are using the in-memory database either on the cloud or either on your personal system, so that are more costly. Even on the cloud, the cost is more. Right. So the disadvantage, there are more cost, but they are very fast. So, do we have any like a database? Yes, we have so many database in memory databases. Example, Redis, Memcache. So these are the two database. Redis is like one of the most famous databases. So it is recently gained very popularity. And one of the another most popular is Memcached. But Redis is even more popular than the Memcached. And there are so many others, maybe like Couchbase and many other. But these are the two most popular. Right. So Redis, the full form is remote dictionary server, and because Redis and Memcache both are the open source, so you can find the code maybe over the GitHub or maybe wherever they store that. Right. So this is the in-memory database. So Redis and Memcache are the open source databases, right? But what is ElastiCache is? ElastiCache. So ElastiCache is a service provided by the Amazon only. Right, so it is a service provided by the Amazon. So it is not a in-memory database. It is a service to deploy your in-memory databases. So it itself is not a in-memory database, but it is a service. It is a service which is going to provide a platform to deploy your database. Because let's suppose if you want to use the Redis as an in-memory database in your computer, how much RAM you have? so you can't scale, right? So there should be one time when you are like going out of memory, right? So that's why we are moving to the cloud, because in the cloud we have the scalable, like the anything can be, we can scale. So similarly, this Redis database we can also scale. Another thing is that, so RAM is more vulnerable to the attacks. So any hacker can attack. So but when we go to the, like when we install our Redis onto the AWS cloud, then they are providing some more security feature. Even on our system itself, we can do a firewall kind of security, some kind of some security we can implement to make it more secure. But AWS is like doing the things on behalf of us. All right. So these are the two examples. So what is Imagine ElastiCache? Imagine ElastiCache is itself not a memory database, but it is a memory cache service. So it's a kind of a cache thing, like Redis and memory kind of a cache thing. So which is going to provide a platform to deploy the in-memory database like Redis and the Memcache. So some advantage are they are fully managed. So it will be managed by the AWS, scalable, durable, and secure. So how we can say it's durable? Because we know if anything on the RAM and if the server got crashed, my data will be lost. So, but here we say durable. Why we say durable? Because AWS, what the AWS is doing is AWS is creating the backups, and where they are going to create the backup, they are creating the backup on the disk, and maybe those disks are on the some another server, and maybe like three backups, and all the three disks are on different three server, so that if any of the server going to crash, maybe if out of three, two server going to crash, still we have one server is up and available, so we can recover the data. So that's it. And some use case, like why we need this, like why can't we just use the like the disk? We know it is faster, but like where actually we are going to, because we know it is not going to store like so much of data. Even we can store a lot of data, but where exactly, like in our application, let's suppose if I am creating some Flask application in the Python, so where in my picture I have to use the RDS database, maybe MySQL or the PostgreSQL, but where this will come into the picture to increase my processing of the application. So, so here is a like a great diagram. It's provided by the AWS. I think I will just download from the Google, like Google Images. So let's suppose you have the application. So this red icon is of the application. Your application is maybe Python application, which is running. So generally what we do is we have the application, we have the database. So what we did is our application is going to access, uh, our application will send some queries, select query, update query, delete, insert any query, and we get the output from the database. But there are some maybe endpoints, right? So which is going to return same response every time. Let's suppose there are some endpoints which are going to return same response every time, or maybe they return different response, but not every time. Maybe let's suppose there are some list of images and some Docker images, let's suppose, or some let's suppose a Python versions. So Python higher version, there is a one database where we are going to store the Python version, Python 2, Python 3. All right. And there is a one endpoint, okay, which Python version we have into database. So every time the user is sending the get request to the database, and we are retrieving, okay, we have full two Python version, Python 2 and Python 3, Python 2 and Python 3. So we know these things are going to change very like maybe like once in a year or twice in a year. All right. But every time user has to hit the database, and then the database is like it will run some query here, and then the result will come and displayed on top of the application. But so these kind of queries, or maybe those queries which are very cost intensive, maybe, right? So those query, what we can do is, so once we hit the query, once we get the result, we are going to store the result into our cache. And here the cache is our Redis database or the Memcache database. So this is the database in which we are going to store. So if we put our Redis or in-memory database in between our application and the databases, then what will happen? So when we write our code, now when we write our endpoint, so let's suppose there is a get endpoint. So in the get endpoint, we are just writing okay select star, but before running even select star, what we can do is we can put some if else condition. So what we will do is first we are going to find the data in a cache, in a in-memory database, that is in the Redis. So here you can say the Redis. So we will set up some connection Redis. We will import Redis dot client, and we will give the Redis client a Redis port, same as the RDS. It has the host name, it has the port name. So we are going to search the data in our in-memory database. So if we found, then we are just directly going to return to our users, right? We will not going to hit the database, and we know this is going to store in the RAM. So we will get the output like very speedily. Okay, so let's suppose if we found the data, then we can call it as a like a cache hit, right? So there is a one more term cache miss. So let's suppose you are trying to find the data into the Redis, because there is a if condition. So if first we find the data in the in-memory database, Redis or memcache, but we did not find, then what it will do is that is a cache miss. So there is no data in that. Then what it will do is it will go to the database, and then whatever the result it will come, then it is going to store into the in-memory database. So this is the normal day-to-day life use case. All right. One more use case is the so in this, like here we have whole architecture, like one is application, one is database, and in between we have the in-memory database. But in this architecture we don't have the RDS. So we don't have the like the hard disk type of database, like where the RDS, MySQL, PostgreSQL. We have only this in-memory database. So there is one more like use case. One is the to store the session. So let's suppose there are so many users, and you are spinning up one application, maybe Python Flask application or Django application, and you are running the same application is being running in three EC2 servers, first EC2, second EC2, and the third EC2. And those application provide some login functionality. All right. So first, let's suppose the Facebook.com. So Facebook is running on first EC2, second EC2, and third EC2. And so generally in the Facebook.com, once you log in, so login will be happen only once. Now doesn't matter how many pages you are going to traverse, whether you go to the about section, home section, images, album, any section, it is not going to ask the re-login again. So how it will happen? Because once you log in, it is going to store your like JWT token, or you are going to store your session, right? So let's suppose, so your user, because in like in normal application what happen, there is a load balancer. So whenever we hit, so we don't know at the back end our query is going to which EC2 server, either it's going to first EC2, second EC2, third EC2. So it may be the reason when I log in, I my request go to the first EC2. So if I my request go to the first EC2, then my session is going to store here only in this EC2. But as soon as I hit on the home page, the second request may be going into the second EC2. But in this EC2 there is no session detail. Then it is going to ask me to do login again, which is wrong. So what it will do is, so once we like once I did the login, so I am going to store my session detail the in-memory database. All right. And I'm going to store my session details in memory database. Whenever the user is going to hit any other page, maybe home page, images, album, any page, so before hitting that, before asking the re-login page, what that particular endpoint will do is it is find the session detail from the in-memory database. Okay, this user has already session available. Then I am not going to ask the re-login again. I am just going to display the page whatever the user has been requested. So that is like one of the use case. So this is the elastic cache map, just an overview. So and so before like just looking into the AWS, we will see whether it's free of cost or do we need to pay. So if you search on the AWS free tier on this aws.amazon.com, and if you search here, if you type cache, so it mentioned 12-month free. So it's come under the 12 months free, right? But only T2.micro, because it is a RAM. I know I told you the data is going to store on the RAM. So let's suppose you created ElastiCache, and you created using 10 GB or 10 TB, then it is not free for you. even if you are in the free tier. So if you are in the free tier and you only use t2.micro or t3.micro, then it is only you're going to free. So keep in mind. So let's try that. So if you come here and search elastic cache, so you could see there is one option, and in the description it is mentioned in memory cache, right? In memory cache. So if you click on it, all right, and let's click on the get started. So there is an option create cluster. So if you click on the create cluster, see here we only see two options, Redis and the memcached. But even the in-memory database, there are so many in-memory database. But AWS ElastiCache provide you the platform to deploy or to create the Redis or the memcache only. So let's create the Redis because Redis is the most famous. So click on the Redis cluster. Now you could see three options. One is easy create, one is configure and create. So easy create means just you can directly going to create, and they are going to provide with the default setting, which may be like you need to pay, because if even in the default setting, let's suppose they are using the 10 TB of RAM, then and you want to just try that. So and you are in the free tier, so you want to try with T2.micro, but if you use the easy create, then maybe you need to pay something. So don't select that. So configure and create a new cluster. So we are going to select that, and one is the restore from backup. So we don't have the backup. So I told you na, in the AWS, what they are doing is, so because if the server is going to crash, so they are storing the backup into the some disk. So this option is for that. If you have some backup, then you can restore your in-memory database from those backups. So we are going to create a new database, or you can say new in-memory cache or cluster. So why it is called a cluster? Because it created like one primary instance and there is a read replica instance. That's why it's called a cluster. Cluster is basically a group of things, right? So that's why called a cluster. Okay. Now the cluster mode, do we want to enable it or disable it? So let's disable it just to save our money, right? Let's give the cluster info. So my Redis, and you can give the description. Now where you want to create this, either AWS cloud or on premises. I want to create on the AWS cloud. Do you want to create the multi-AZ? No, I don't want to create the multi-AZ. So like if you create the multi-AZ, so it is going to create one more like copy into some another availability zone, and so you need to pay, but we are using only free tier option, but this is the option. You can just click on it and auto failover. So we are not going to select that auto failover. Here you can select the Redis version. So okay, by default 7.0, which is fine. So port is this fine. This is also like we are setting. Now here, like how much memory you need. So we are in the free tier. So we will use T2.micro. So T2.micro, right? So how many number of replicas? We don't need any replica, so we will give 0. Okay. So now uh, create a subnet. So let's create a new subnet group. So my Redis subnet, and that if you have the VPC, or you can create on the default VPC. Okay, so click on the next. Now if you want to encrypt your data, it's fine, you can select that. Otherwise just ignore for this time being. Do you want to create a backups? No, I don't want to create a backups. So no maintenance window preference, which is fine. Do you want to enable the logs? No, right now I don't want to enable the logs. If you want to add the tags, which is also you can create. Next. So this is the information. So just click on the create. So it will take a few minutes to create my database. So let's wait a couple of minutes. So our memory database, in-memory database has been available. So if you click on it, you could see we have the endpoint. One is the primary endpoint, one is the reader endpoint. Fine. And we have the port as well, like 6379 and 6379. So these endpoints, just a host name, like whenever you create the RDS, any database, so you have the host name in your hand. So it's you can treat as a normal database only. You don't need to get it. It's not a very hi-fi thing. You just treat it as a normal database. The only thing is it is going to store the data into the memory, into the RAM, right? So this is the primary endpoint and this is the reader endpoint. So how you are going to connect? So if you just go to the Redis documentation, what you have to do? So pip install Redis. Why pip install Redis? Is for the Redis package. All right. Then import Redis, and then you need to Redis. Then you need to give hostname, which it is already provided. Then you need to give the port, and you need to give the password if you have the password. So there, and how you are going to set the value. So r dot set the key and the value. So Redis is a very vast variety. It supports very vast variety: set, dictionary, list, string. It supports a large number of data structures. But Memcache doesn't support a large number of data structures. So that's why Redis is famous. So this is just like a normal Python thing, like how we're going to connect, which is like a different thing. So now you see like because we create one node, so our Redis has been up and ready for the use. So once that get ready, you can use it. So let's try to delete it. So just click on it and go to the action and delete it. Do you want to create a backup? No, I don't want to create a backup. So just delete it and I can delete the my Redis. And also you can see because we created the EC2, not EC2 because we created the subnets. So in the VPC, sorry. So if you go to the subnet, where that subnet went, because when we created the Redis cluster, click on it, network and security. So this is our subnet group name. So if you click on it, okay, so this is our new subnet, my Redis subnet. Okay, so that's it. So now you can delete it. So otherwise you so that you don't need to pay. So delete it. Do you want to create a backup? No. So I can just delete it. My Redis. Delete it. So it will take some time to get it deleted. So that's it. That's the end of the video. And thank you.